Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Janusz Lewicki. A recent investigation into an anti-EU online campaign shows Poland is being raided by AI bots posing as Eurosceptic influencers. This wouldn't be the first time Moscow tried to meddle in European affairs in cyberspace, but the issue also takes place at a time when European regulatory efforts continue to ruffle feathers in Silicon Valley and in Washington. So how is Poland responding to the latest challenges of the ongoing tech race? Joining us now is Dariusz Standerski, Polish Deputy Minister of Digital Affairs. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good to be here.
So let's begin with this latest phenomenon. Pretty girls saying the Pole exit is the way to go, the European Union doesn't make sense, except these women never existed. They are generated by artificial intelligence and unfortunately taking the social media by storm. How do we respond to challenges like that?
Yeah, indeed. We've observed a massive dissemination of AI-generated content, spreading disinformation all across TikTok in Poland. And at the very beginning, in the morning, December 29th, our services, especially our NASC services of our computer center, started to contact with TikTok. And I would like to underline that TikTok was active and TikTok actively shut down this profile and stopped the further dissemination. And I appreciate that. However, we requested from the European Commission to launch proceedings concerning TikTok because we need to be fully aware that the situation should never happen because under the Digital Services Act in the European Union, all very large online platforms are obliged to have risk management and risk assessment processes, which failed in case of TikTok.
But the problem is, with the DSA and with the regulation in general, that some of these organizations and companies are actively fighting back. They don't really want to be regulated. And not in the case of TikTok, obviously, because we're talking about China, but we have companies based in the US, and they have a very powerful backing in the form of the White House. How do you actually, walk this fine line between maintaining good relations with our ally, but also imposing the necessary limits on the activities of businesses across the European Union?
Yeah, first of all, we need to remember that the Digital Services Act is already in force because it was enacted in 2022 and is in force since February last year. So it means that this legislation, this law, is already under execution in the European Union. And since then, we had, for example, one proceeding against X. And the European Commission imposed a fee of 120 million euros on X because of the failure of verification system on the platform. And
after which Elon Musk seemed to launch something of a crusade against the European Union in general.
Yeah, he did it on his own platform on X. However, there is always something beyond. There is the world beyond X or another platform, and this decision of the European Commission was real, and the fee is imposed, and now X will pay about 120 million euros. And other proceedings are underway because in the European Union we have a simple rule. If you want to sell your services or your products in the European Union, you need to follow European law. That's it, and only this.
Well, what about the diplomatic pressure? I assume it must be immense. The United States has always been quite protective of its companies, and we really don't have any sort of homegrown competition. It's not like we have our own version of X or Google. So Silicon Valley still has powerful leverage, right?
Well, I'm in touch with representatives of large platforms, and on many occasions we agreed that laws like Digital Services Act are in many occasions in favor of those platforms because the state takes part of responsibility of content spreading on platforms. So for their business plans, it is an opportunity. And that's why also talking with the representatives of the US government, what they are focused on is the coherent implementation of the European law in member states and also liberal implementation of this law. So we see that with many companies we are on the same page because we all want to have the same law in the whole European Union, and we all want to have our liberties secured and our businesses spreading. And such businessmen like Mr. Musk are not the role of our relations.
Of course, he's an exception, but he also wields powerful influence. Are we ready for a situation, hypothetically, elections taking place in a European country, a massive disinformation campaign orchestrated by Moscow is being launched, there are bots, there are deep fake videos appearing all across social media. The European Union launches proceedings or, begins negotiations like we did with TikTok, like you said. But the given company, the platform, is not cooperating. They say, no, freedom of speech, we're not taking it down. What should be done in such case? Are we ready for the consequences?
We've seen many examples of such events, for example, in Romania and in Poland as well during our presidential and their presidential elections. And we had our actions on many layers. First is daily work with those platforms. Fortunately, we see that every platform is active in terms of contacting us in such matter, and we see that there is still a lot to be done from the European level. And from my perspective, we need to do it systematically, because, for example, if we'll have watermark on every AI-generated content, it will not pose such threat as without this watermark. So this is this year regulation, and I believe we need to be prepared well systematically before any campaign, especially for a campaign in Poland in 2027, to have lower level of such dangerous content, as you said.
That's a very important point. I mean, with AI-generated content, regulating AI in general, but would these kind of regulations be watertight? We can imagine major companies agreeing, okay, we're going to watermark this kind of content, because otherwise there is a risk of misleading content spreading online. But what about companies which are based outside our jurisdiction, or even users downloading, versions of the software that can operate without connection to the internet, and therefore with, no restrictions? I mean, many explicit videos are created that way, users operating copies which do not run a permanent internet connection. I'm assuming that in such case they would be able to circumvent the watermark requirement and upload the videos. So what should we do in cases like that? Do we even have the tools to counteract this sort of threat?
Watermark regulations will be imposed on platforms automatically, and some platforms are doing it right now. For example, LinkedIn platform already has such kind of rules, partly Instagram and Facebook as well. And we have some tools to prevent such behavior as you described. However, those tools are restricted, and there are not so many of them as we would like, because we have in our pocket blocking websites, blocking exact content on those websites. I agree that still we should have more and more tools in such area. That's why we are working on the European level on technical solutions. For example, such solutions like age verification of users on online platforms. This solution now is tested in France, Greece, and a couple of other member states. Poland is watching and will be ready this year to implement another tool preventing such behaviors.
Speaking of identity verification, can we talk a bit about the M-Obywatel program? This is the system which allows people to use their digital identity safety in Poland. Can it actually help us create perhaps some sort of bigger framework which would allow people to better protect their identity on a broader scale in the European Union in general, for example?
We are working on that because at the end of this year, in December 2026, we will be able to bring our digital identification outside Poland because European Union digital identification wallet will be available, and we are working to integrate with this standard. It means that with new app which will be strictly connected to M-Obywatel, we will be able to go outside Poland and verify our identification, our ID also in Germany, France, and Italy. And that's not all, because our verification will be also enabling us to get services from outside Poland. For example, to buy insurance in Italy, to get a loan in Ireland. And it means that also Irish or Italian or French people will be able to do it from Polish companies. So we will observe the new chapter in the European services.
So now we're at a moment, at a junction, so to say, when new technologies are emerging very rapidly. What do you think is going to be the next big challenge? We already have large language models, so artificial intelligence as we know it today. But what about, for example, the legislative framework for the extensive use of robotics, autonomous systems, because these are apparently evolving very fast indeed as well. Do you think the European Union has what it takes to stay in the race and not to be overtaken by countries like the US, but also China, which is making a very quick progress on this front?
Yeah, indeed. From my perspective, large language models are only the first step, and this or the next year we will see the further steps of AI development combining with quantum development as well. But going back to AI, we will see new multimodal models spreading across our industries, and what Europe really needs is to have more and more investments in AI. And that's why this year we will build in Poland 2 AI factories in Poznan and Kraków to have more models developed in Poland for Polish companies. And that's why we are competing for AI Gigafactory, the largest infrastructure in AI within our continent. So that's why I believe that investments are what we need to succeed in this second step, because we need to be aware that the first step was not the European success, and we need to do our best to succeed in this second step of AI.
And a very quick question, do you think that Europe should perhaps pool its resources? I mean, we've already established that we don't really have companies like Google or Meta being based in the EU. So can Europe actually create a model for fostering innovation which would allow it to compete with the biggest players in the field today?
I truly believe so, because our European model is successful, and we've proven it for many occasions. And now, after our infrastructure will be built, we need to get another step to create internal market for the European Union. Infrastructure plus demand means that we are able to create in the future global players in AI, and not only in AI in the European Union.
Dariusz Standerski was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm Jan Szerewiński. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.